Welcome to MSP Playbook. Today we have a special guest with us. He's an accomplished cybersecurity professional with expertise in ethical hacking and penetration testing. He's also the founder of Paradox InfoSec cybersecurity firm, established in 2022 in Slovakia. With a solid background as a senior penetration tester, and ethical hacker from the United Kingdom, Abbas is dedicated to safeguarding business against security breaches and countering threat actors effectively. Abbas, thank you for joining us today. It's really nice having you.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to our session. I was really excited when we, spoke initially and when you accepted our invitation, because I really wanted to pick your brain a little bit and see what you think on the topic of layered security strategies and so on. But before we go down that road, as I mentioned in my intro, you founded your company in 2022, but you have a little bit bigger experience than that. So if you could just, share a little bit with us, when did it all start for you? Why pen testing, and what was the journey like from the beginning to the point of opening your own company?
Sure. So since I was 10 years old, my dad gave me a computer. So at that time, it was Windows 95. And at the age of 13, I was already, repairing, fixing, and building computers from my high school. So that was in Holland. I was not even in college in the Netherlands. So I speak 3 languages as well, fluently, just because of the backgrounds. And after that, we decided to move to the UK for study. So since I have a hobby interest in computers and building and fixing them as well, so I decided to go to the networking side of IT. So I was doing my CCNAs. I was actively working on while studying on Active Directory, first line, second line, and managed to get to the third line as well. So I was doing anything from the first to third line for companies while studying. And when I came to when I went to the UK, there were a lot of breaches happening, and also ransomware happening. I don't know if you remember WannaCry ransomware.
Of course,
that was and that was the hospital behind us on the NHS, and we were in charge of various brands in the UK that you today see in Tesco, for example, and shopping centers. And we were the first one that got contacted by authorities to actually secure systems, because these are, generating a lot of money, maybe in the millions or billions. So not only I was setting up networks and configuring them to the best practices, but it also went through my thoughts, like how this is achieved, what kind of encryption is it, why does it happen? So root causes based on the full exploitation of the model of a ransomware, of a hacker, of how to get a foothold into the network, what can they do with it, are passwords enough? So I was already testing, as a professional, actually, and I was already testing networks in case they receive the virus, in case they receive the Trojan, what kind of connections and how you can stop the bleeding. So while doing that, I moved on to a other company, and they were getting ransomware all the time, and they needed someone to come in place, do a bit of testing for them sites, and stop the bleeding as well for that site for them. So I was doing also web applications most of the time, but my main strength, of course, is network infrastructure, because since very young on, I know how group policies works, how Active Directory works, what kind of settings needs to be. You got MSPs like yourself, so you have antivirus, solutions, EDRs, IDSs, and so on. So that was basically the base foundation for us, for myself, to actually implement to a network. But it's still something when to happen. So, for example, there's still something ongoing. If a website is hosted from the internal network and they have a code execution, for example, is this the first point of a breach? And most of the time at that place, the answer was yes. So I was focusing my interest more on cybersecurity from then, because since I know the foundation of it as well. So yeah, I took myself as a full-time tester. So we started to test networks for clients from companies as well. and safeguard them as well in terms of it's not only okay. This is how you get domain admin. This is how how we got access to your database. This is how the passwords get not necessarily sprayed around, but extracted from a hash and passed over the hash. And it's not only doing the pen test for clients based on how vulnerable they are, but also recommend them how to secure their networks from today and the next 5 years. Because we also have a scope, and most of the clients that came to us, most of the people that come to us, that come to myself, is they are worried about a product that they have stored sensitive data on, and this is the reason why they require a pen test, actually, because we all understand compliance is not necessary security or stress testing, because it grabs, it has some rules that are actually stopping the bleeding, but there's always ways on how to do those things. So that brings me up today, coming to Slovakia. My partner, she's from here. And in Slovakia, there's not many cybersecurity companies, even though I worked for a few, which is great. And the thing that I'm seeing, that I'm focused on most likely is helping companies as much as possible. So it's not profit or anything motivated. It's more likely helping companies to safeguard their data, for example, and what can they do about it. And it's not only about it's not only network infrastructures and web applications. It's also about mobile phones, by phone signals that we can identify SIM cards, from a long distance, and we also have a various of expertise of making things work. So most likely anything that has a router or a signal or a cable plugged in, I'm able to help. Yeah, because it's going from project to project. It's never the same, you see. So those things are actually evolving, and to keep myself up to date. And if I really do require, I do also have a small team that helps me out. But yeah, I hope this works. This helped a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned several times, your clients. When you're speaking about client, do you have some kind of, let's say, specific type of the client that you work with, or you're basically servicing different type of clients from different sectors? What would be your
For
focus?
my side, for my focus, it will be anyone that requires cybersecurity consultant,
Regardless of their size.
regardless of their size. So they can be a very small company, and they can be a corporate that requires contractors to be in to help them out because they don't have the resources. Because 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, pen testers were required a lot, and now they're all they all have a contract based that they work for. And yeah, there's always need for testers to be involved. And for my side, it doesn't matter how big or how small the clients are. Yes.
What would you say was, let's say, the biggest client that you work with?
So it's gonna be healthcare, healthcare hospitals in a different country. And but yeah, so those people, they really required someone to come on site, and for example, an application that's been tested for several years and for many years, and and if testers don't involve, or cybersecurity don't involve in like the latest tricks, the latest hacks, the latest methodologies, you'll be exactly doing the same thing for the next, you will get the same results for the same vendor, for example. But for me, it's slightly different. I have a group of followers, and also people that I look up to, that releases new content every week, and these are pure ethical people. So
this is basically how you keep up to date with the latest
latest,
exploits.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you're talking about these kind of, let's say, projects that are government focused, like healthcare and so on, I'm sure you heard of a recent breach that was in Ireland. I think their health care system was completely down for a really short, not necessarily short amount of time, but it was really a big cybersecurity breach, which was handled pretty fast by government involvement. But when you're working on these kind of projects, do you work alone? Do you work with the team? How does it basically work on your side?
So for most of the time, I work alone, and if there's multiple projects at the same time, so I avoid assigning myself to 2 tasks at the same time, but still we check each other's findings, we check each other's recommendations. So one person and one project, just to avoid the the mix-up of focus of so we don't miss out anything. Most of the time I go one project at a time and one focus step at a time, of course, because the client is paying for our time, and we don't want to mix or 8 hours or 9 hours. Most of the time it's not even 8 hours, it's actually quite more, because we have scans, we have manual investigations, we have everything. So we don't see it as an hourly thing, but a daily thing, right? So I don't believe it's an hourly thing, because it's never 8 hours, to be honest with you. And so one thing at a time. And I manage also to to extract the whole overview of the project, and where the smallest needle in the haystack could fall under, and also the technologies that are used, what kind of versions are used. Is it CVE based? Is it with configuration based? Is it is it how is it authenticating? What kind of data is it storing? How is the data flowing and so on? So we have a full checklist that I go over, and this is going to be the main focus, one thing at a time, because avoiding, of course, 2 things at the same time, because it's not the best practices.
And when you look back in, let's say, past year or two, how challenging was it actually for you specifically as a pen tester? Because we had so much changes, remote work, cloud environments, increased sophistication of attacks, advanced persistent threats, zero-day vulnerabilities. I mean, how was it, how difficult for you to keep track with all these technology changes and innovations?
Yeah, it's of course not too difficult, but it is difficult, because after those working hours that you do, you always keep up to date with the latest, and you also check why is it happening, how is it happening, and like you mentioned, remote work. Everyone is working remotely, and people that are not necessarily trained to not click on phishing emails, for example, they still fall for those things. If the laptop is not encrypted, it still could get stolen. And if you bring it to an IT expert or a hacker or whatever with malicious intentions, he will still at least try to extract hashes or passwords from the laptop one way or the other, if it's not encrypted, of course.
But for
So yeah.
example, take one, pretty fresh example. You, for example, you do some kind of pen testing services for a company that uses Barracuda email security gateways. I mean, would you be able actually, to detect this, to catch this? I mean, before it's even out, for people that do not know, there is pretty recent, like a few days ago, a new security breach in Barracuda email gateway appliances that exposes, let's say, to some extent, the data on the appliance to the attackers. Maybe Abbas, you can, share more. You know more maybe than me about this.
Yeah, so the 0 day is basically uploading or sending a file, and through a tar file, Linux, because this is how it's actually hosted on. You can actually access or retrieve data from that. So 0 days are quite tricky to track. But for example, if you have an email server hosted on an environment, segment, to segment as much as servers as possible from the same environment. That's the key to a breach that actually pivots to the next machine. So if it actually has a remote code execution, then what kind of environment is it living under, or where does it sit? So is it only this machine affected, and what kind of data can be extracted? So what kind of data is hosted, and how many users have access to it, and is it under the same environment as, for example, another data, on a data center with the same, can it ping each other? Let me put it this way, can it access other IP addresses based on the same network? So, yeah, so it's quite tricky to detect those things. But for example, if it's publicly facing, then sure, you have people like myself as for good relationships. If I know a client has those services running in their background, I don't hesitate for 2 minutes to say, okay, listen, there is something, either, keep it on the safeguard or shut it off until there's a patch released. And usually what they do is they take it offline and they hold it for the next few days, because vendors, they tend to release very quickly an update for it. So they patch it and they bring it back online, and they just have a simple outage, which is not a problem, of course. Yeah.
When it comes to, let's say, main initiators or drivers for companies reaching out to you for your services, would it be more that those companies are, let's say, that have security awareness and would want to make sure that they are really, safe and protected from cyber incidents, or would it be more from compliance perspective? What is the main driver for pen testing services in your perspective?
A bit of both. Yeah, a bit of both. So they have client, user awareness, which is phishing emails, and education, and they have to go through a whole set of training, based on videos, based on questionnaires, based on multiple choices and stuff like that. So they have a user awareness not to click on links and stuff like that. And also compliance is based on what kind of software they have in place. For example, proxy gateways, email filtering and stuff like that. But it's always have a second thought before opening or clicking something. And local administrators shouldn't have local administrators, because HR clicks most likely on anything that has a free voucher, right?
Yeah.
So
but that's the thing, that's, for example, one specific dilemma, but we can, tackle this when we come to, let's say, layered security topic. Is you do cyber awareness trainings, or let's say phishing education and awareness training for the clients, but that doesn't really, mean that after those trainings, after those educations, the customers or the clients will not click on suspicious links, because it's all about the moment. Maybe now I've learned something today, yesterday, so tomorrow I'm not paying attention, I'm, under stress, I will click, on something. So I mean, it's like companies are investing, money in this type of education and awareness, but it's not really a bulletproof strategy. There's still a big possibility that someone will click anyway on a link.
Correct. Yes, we, in the past, I've also seen clients that have everything literally in place, like very, very strict. And, the email, the phishing emails, they don't come through because, it's really restricted. But for example, their partners, their business partners, one of their email addresses get compromised, and it's whitelisted to their, employees. And yeah, so anything in doubt, it's not bulletproof.
I actually, sorry to interrupt you, but I actually didn't know till recently that there is really a term being used for this kind of, hacking activities. It's called amygdala hack.
Right. Okay.
You know about it, or?
If you can remind me, that would be great. So we're on.
Yeah, no, it's like they're saying that basically threat actors and attackers are using emotional states, like, putting people in stressful situations, or, situations where they have to do quickly something. And when people are under stress, they tend to, so information is going straight to amygdala, and, going around the areas of the brain that are, used for logical assessment of information. And basically people are reacting based on their emotions. So this is a specific term for this kind of, exploit. It's amygdala hack, related to phishing scenarios and attacks. I really didn't know it till recently, but it's a really interesting info that I found.
Correct.
Did you any time during your projects have any kind of, situations where you have encountered any challenges or ethical dilemmas in your pen testing?
Yes, of course. Because everyone comes to us with our applications are secure. We spend this amount of money on it. We've been tested for many years, and let's say a good 80% of my test, also of my people, because I'm training them as well. we also we keep finding stuff that had never been found before because they're overlooked, you know, and basically, yeah. The answer is yes, because it's always it's never easy to to hack into some networks because but for instance, Cloudflare and stuff like that, and they have scanners and they have version grabbers and they have Nestec scans and stuff like that. But no one checks for broken access control, for example, or broken authorization, and those, what user A can see is user B cannot see, and those things are not available from the dashboard on the website, but they're only available from an API point of view, for example. Yeah, so the answer is yes, it's always challenging, but it's also well, not necessarily fun for a pen tester, but yeah, it's you get sort
not
of a fun
necessarily
out.
fun.
Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah. No, as you said, it's not necessarily fun every time.
Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes we have to email clients like the first 2 days because we found something really, really critical that's not intended, or access to a config file, that's not being filtered, or an API documentation, or a cross-site scripting that's uploaded to a PDF file that actually bypasses the whole scenarios. And even if you, sorry.
No, it's I wanted to check, have you encountered recently some kind of, high profile security breach or vulnerability on your recent, projects and tests?
Yeah.
I mean,
So
I'm not sure what type of, what amount of data you can share with us, something,
yeah.
some kind of, interesting situations that you,
Sure.
encountered.
So this is going to be about a website. I will not call the name out, but apparently there's a lot of tests like this, unfortunately. But we managed to pull customer data out. So we managed to pull customer data out. We managed to pull out, for example, hashes, not necessarily through an SQL, but through an API that's not properly filtered. We identify SQL injections. They should. Yeah, so it depends on the scenario.
Those are pretty serious. Those are pretty serious.
So for example, single sign-on. There's also scenarios where I bypassed the whole filter because in the response there was sort of a session that you can reuse. So, and bear in mind when I mentioned those applications are being tested for many many years. Yeah. So yeah.
And when you do these kind of tests and evaluations, I'm guessing you use some kind of a specific set of tools that are available out there on the market. But do you also have some kind of specific tools built by yourself?
Yeah.
Something. I mean, I think that the difference between a good pen tester and an excellent pen tester is their toolbox.
Correct.
How good are you in creating your own tools, to penetrate systems?
So, for example, I have a tool in Burp Suite that I created by myself, and that literally extracts all the parameters. So it's copy it to a word list, and you can inject each and single one of them. So, so those kind of tools that I use, and also like for example, open source tools, we have Kali Linux in the background running with good stuff, and we only use professional versions. So we invest in our tool sets. So the ones that are free and the ones that we developed are actually to extract, to identify if there is like stored keys, client IDs, client secrets, environments, stuff like that. So if it injects each and every single parameter in a website, for example, that's authenticated, is it actually showing us something interesting? Because sometimes those things are hosted in AWS. You have client ID, client secrets. So you can actually extract it and pipe it to the cloud. So those kind of scenarios I do test for, and my team also tests for. So yeah, the answer is yes, of course. Own toolings are very, very important if you want to extract the correct data for the correct scenarios. Absolutely, yes.
And as you know, we are focused on layered security approach when it comes to cybersecurity, and along with our partners, we are really promoting this approach. So I was interested to hear what you or how you feel about this layered security approach where you would have, specific, technologies safeguarding specific, aspects of the system, whether it's, human aspect or, endpoints or passwords. And also, when we are, talking about this layered security, what would be interesting to know, because we see it's always like a balance between, risk and costs. It's like, how much should we, implement? Does this make sense? We already have three, softwares, three tools in place. Do we need another one? Will this really save us, protect us, or not? So, what's your general idea, or how to say? Um, what do you think about this layered security approach? And uh, have you, encountered or did scenarios where customers had such different solutions, like antivirus, EDR, of course, firewalls?
Yeah, so layered security is definitely important because that's going to be your base foundation of a company, of course. So you got filters, you got antivirus, EDRs, IDSs to detect anything suspicious. And on top of it comes best configuration. So you have a base foundation that everything in your network can reach and actually uses. But some aspects, some assets on the network, they deserve a tiny bit more attention, and this is where pen testing comes in place. This is where benchmarking comes in place. This is where access management comes in place. This is where data control comes in place. Is the same password used for can an attacker pivot from a workstation that's been compromised to that? And this is when a pen testing comes in place. Actually, most evaluated. And yeah.
How do you feel? What's your opinion about, let's say, standard antivirus products? How well do they really protect environments from?
So standard antivirus products such as Defender, to be honest, they're quite easy to bypass because these are all based on a signature. So this is not user behavior, So
Yeah. So basically, anything without signature is really not detected by them, if I understand correctly. Or
yeah, any non-signature based on the database file that Defender stores on the system, you can look it up. If it's not there, and most of the custom code that I create for Pentest, to test antivirus solutions, good 85% goes through, and this is basically a small foothold in the network. And anything malicious code that antivirus do detect, for example, like payload or base64 encoded PowerShell script, for example, it will get detected and it will get blocked. But if you behave like a user, this is not how it's going to get blocked. So yeah, it's all signature based or EDRs and the advanced stuff. So free antivirus solutions, Defender and those things, they have really good detection, but it's not necessarily flagged up as a high on the dashboard. It's not necessarily flagged up as a something suspicious. We've been to scenarios as well where things has to be invested a tiny bit more. Sometimes if you do an iCockles based on the folder where the antivirus is installed, for example, Trend Micro, and one of the activation script, you can run it by any user. You can actually knock the antivirus off. You can disable the antivirus off. So those scenarios I've seen as well. So I would say to invest in a good antivirus solution.
Yeah, but for example, so as you know, you have different, of course, antivirus products, different levels of protection that they offer. All of them are based on signatures. So in my perspective, you're just with antivirus, you're in a way hoping that you don't get hit first. That signature already exists. But some also have sandboxing environments and stuff like that. How do you feel about these kind of solutions with sandboxing environments?
I mean, sandboxing is definitely key, right? I mean, this is something like, for example, simple antivirus products, they don't have it, such as Defender, and this is where it comes in place where vendors and clients invest in those kind of approaches, so to identify if it's actually doing something else than open in a PDF file, or definitely.
So it's let's say one level higher or
Yes.
better protection, definitely. Because we also work with some antivirus products, but we are, in the past year or two or so, moving more to EDR, XDR solutions, because we see a big difference in the level of protections offered by, let's say an EDR and antivirus. There are,
Mhm.
different threats, like browser down drive-by downloads, or malware that's completely constantly changing whenever it's detected by antivirus. It changes just a small piece of the data, so the signature is actually differently, so it's constantly a constant threat for the system that the antivirus can resolve. So we have seen that EDR is here a little bit better level of protection, especially with automatic network disconnect to prevent any lateral movement and stuff like that. But we also see that on top of, let's say, it's never, you can't really say, okay, hey, here's the product, this is the product that will protect you. And of course, this is the challenge that also our IT service providers are having. First of all, of course, they have to protect their customers, but they also have to protect their own environments. And we always talking about creating some kind of, baseline. Okay, so when you create, let's say, bundle your services, if it's, security services, or if you're an MSP, going in direction of MSSP, you have to see which approach do you take. What is enough, what is my baseline. Okay, there has to be some
Yep.
kind of backup solution. There has to be EDR. We will not accept a customer that doesn't have EDR, that they have some kind of antivirus, free antivirus, or a paid antivirus. It doesn't really make matter.
Yep.
Of course, UTM devices, mail security, pretty important. So when you just take a step back and take a look at the bigger picture, what would you, if you're, for example, providing security services, what would you create as your baseline? Okay, these are the products that any
Yep.
customer that I'm servicing has to have. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that they will be safe.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree, because I think the most important ones is firewall enabled, SMB sign-in, for example, best practices, LDAP sign-in if it comes to Active Directory accounts, MFA definitely, with timeout sessions. This is very important.
Mm,
EDRs, antivirus solutions that are basically detecting with the most popular ones that have a
mm,
good value on the market. And also, for example, a lot of audits based on control access management. So
mm, mm,
is this SMB shared drive open to everyone? If the answer is yes, what kind of data is stored there? Is there passwords? You know. So, for example, if you have a foothold and the EDR didn't detect it necessary, there's always a private point from one computer to another computer, and EDR is basically most likely on the file that's been actually downloaded,
mm,
but it's not based on the user behavior that's actually implemented on the network. So Active Directory,
mm.
you have delegations, you have constrained delegations, and so on. And these are all private points that you can actually achieve with a very low privilege user. So you don't even have to be an administrator. So
You know what I what
mhm,
I what I like? I saw one solution
yeah,
that I was pretty impressed by.
mhm,
And the solution is in its core focused on privilege access management and
yep,
application management. And what
correct,
they do is they say, okay, listen, specific user, doesn't have
mhm,
right to execute application with administrator rights.
yep,
But they can do it really granularly and say, okay, you don't have administrator rights for this endpoint, but for this specific endpoint, you can execute specific application with administrator rights. And on top of this, they also, do ring fencing around applications, and they say, okay, listen, now that you have executed application with elevated rights, these are the actions that you can execute. For example, let's say you can execute PowerShell with elevated rights, but then that you have it running, you're still limited by actions you can execute within the PowerShell. Or let's say they have shared folder, some files on this folder, let's say PDFs or Word documents, whatever, Excel. They say, okay, this type of document can be only accessed by Microsoft Word. So for Word documents, only Word. So you can't really access these files that are on the share with other applications or similar. So it seems like a really really good basis.
Yeah, I agree. I fully agree. But I also have a feeling those things are always bypassable.
Yeah, from your
Those
perspective, for sure.
thoughts.
Like
Yeah,
multi-factor. I'm sure that you know the ways to bypass multi-factor.
correct. And
Yeah.
we also have like a lot of subject escapes and stuff like that, and those are
Okay,
also
but
very.
this brings me back to my question. So
Yeah.
we're talking about different layers of security. So we spoken about privilege access management, which is really important because first steps of exploiting a system is elevating your privileges and lateral movement. So we are talking about PAM. We are talking about preventing lateral movement. We are talking about protection from phishing or spear phishing attacks that are most usually your door into the systems. We are talking about multi-factor authentication, application control and other stuff. But for every of these layers, you know a way to go around them. So for me, as a, let's say, IT service provider, it's like, okay, what does then make sense if I implement, I don't know, 10 different solutions, and this costs my clients X thousand of euros per month, and then there is still a person that can go around all of these, what does really make sense then?
I would say that not necessarily the default configurations, but the best practices needs to be implemented on each solution. And it's not like, okay, I'm a pen tester and I can go throughout everything that you have
I know what
implemented.
you mean.
It's basically stopping the bleeding. So for example, if I manage to bypass the first layer and I cannot do anything with the second access control that I managed to get into, then the bleeding stops, and this is the time for the EDR, for the IDS to detect to detect it. So this is where you stop the bleeding. And but yeah, so I'm not saying everyone has those best practices involved, implemented, but this is something we check for as well. Definitely.
So basically what you're saying is, okay, let's say some kind of initial security layers will maybe get you into the system, but the more best practices are applied to specific environment, the more trouble you will have to exploit it. Meaning you will have to go for, let's say, noisy tactics that can be easily detected by security solutions that are in place.
Absolutely. Yep, 100%.
Because your goal is basically to be to create less noise as possible. So as soon as you have to create noise,
this is where the trouble kicks in for
this is yeah, okay.
Mm.
There is in the industry, there is some kind of let's say general opinion. If you want to safeguard your environments, it's like, okay, first you have to have a backup you have to have in place, because without that it's like nothing really else matters. And we've seen recently, everybody's going around and promoting immutable storage, like immutability. I mean, depending on what type of immutability it is, if it's hardware or a software immutability, the attackers or threat actors can still access those data, and then you have the same problem
I'll
if
tell you something. The recent Veeam, backup solution,
Yeah.
There were cyber attacks from years and not years ago. For example, 6 to 7 months ago, and they stole the encrypted Veeam files. But guess what? It's encrypted, right? So if you open it with the Veeam software, it requires a password. But very recently, there is a not 0-day, but there is a CVE that they actually can use to extract those passwords from the Veeam. So they keep data on a site, so it's never secure when it comes to necessary encryption, because those things happen all the time. But
this Veeam thing, is it ongoing or
it stopped now.
it stopped?
They stopped
Okay.
it. Yeah, they stopped
Okay.
it. They patched it, but it was really possible just to run a simple command and extract the password from it, because it's stored in memory or a process or a pipe, or on a config file, and it's been there
Yeah.
forever. Yeah.
And then, for example, on top of backup, I mean, let's focus on endpoints, some kind of suggestion is to have, let's say, EDR, because as we spoken, antivirus, yeah, oh man, it's okay, but it's really not, something that can protect you. It's good, but not really a solution. So we see that EDR, would be a next level. Then, of course, potentially. And so these are then the things, for example, from backup EDR, you have email security, you have some kind of, let's say, DNS filtering or UTM devices. Regardless, let's put aside this part that you have a good point is like best practices when it comes to configuration. If you misconfigured something within the system, then hey, it's like most likely it will be used for a breach. But email security, and then on top of these we have this privilege access management, application control, which, for example, I see companies that are using this privilege access management and application controls as the only thing that they have in their environment, and it keeps them protected, because anything that's out of the ordinary, it will be blocked by the system. You can't execute anything that doesn't apply with the rules created within this software or system, let's say. But that's another thing. Someone has to create those rules. You have to be, you have to have I don't know, 1, 2, 3 people who will constantly check the rules and see if everything is, okay. And then at some point, it will happen that you maybe need to stretch those rules because something's not working, within environment. So it's like I think this is hard to maintain, but I like this approach, because even if a phishing email comes and a person clicks on the link, nothing can be executed because it's not recognized by the system. But also the EDR would stop this most likely as well. So these are some kind of basics. Okay, so backup, EDR, PAM and application control, DNS filtering and so on. And then we see other things that are coming. Of course, basics would be also phishing education and awareness trainings, but we also see, okay, now we have the solutions that are used for data exfiltration prevention. And I find them really cool, because I mean, they will not I don't pretty cool. So they will not actually, prevent exploitation of the system. So attacker will be able to enter the system, but they will not be able to extract any data. The data will stay within the system. So now, as you know, recently it's not anymore about just encrypting the data. They want to take the data, and of course, how to say, sell it on dark web, and offer it online. But the thing is, that also, when it comes to this point now, customers are asking, okay, listen, well, I have a backup, I have, EDR, I have, email security, I have phishing awareness education. Why the hell do I need additional layer? Well, to prevent data exfiltration, because maybe it can happen that somebody takes your data. Yeah, but it's encrypted, it's like, what are they going to do with the data if it's encrypted? Well,
Actually, this is very difficult, because usually when we compromise systems like Active Directories and stuff, we add ourselves to an admin user group. So
also
do you know what I mean? So Yeah,
You
but how
always
do you?
leave some kind of backdoor, and
Yeah,
that's the thing, when there's some kind of exploit, difference between AV and EDR. So EDR will give you the whole, how to say, a breakdown of what happened within the system. What was the footprint, or let's say extent of the breach? If it's only an endpoint, if it's a complete system, what exactly was changed? Which processes were, participating? What files and data was, changed and adjusted? And it helps you to understand, okay, listen, the breach was contained on this one or two endpoints, so it's enough for me just to remove them, re-image, and completely, put new endpoints in the system. Or, the AD was affected, and now at this point, I'm really not sure what kind of, changes and backdoors the attackers left, and what do I need to change. And there's no way to knowing this if you have just, let's say, a standard antivirus. I don't know, asset Bitdefender. It doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really make how to say matter, not make sense. It doesn't really matter. But it's like there's no way for you to know. It's like, what am I supposed to do now? It's like, am I supposed to just, do a complete system all over, or?
Yeah, so it's a very, very tricky one because, like I mentioned, like anything that you execute on a foothold, like anything malicious, it will get flagged. But if you behave like a user, you add a separate user. And to be honest, Siniša, when you hear stories like, oh, this attacker has been on the network for X amount of years or X amounts of months, this is how it's done, because you have 4,000 employees, 4,000 assets, 4,000. So how do you identify? Why does it happen? So it's very, very tricky. Plus, anything that's not based on EDRs and stuff, the reverse shell, the connection out, it's not encrypted and it's not detected. So it's, if you Wireshark it, for example, you can literally see clear text traffic, and that is not encrypted. It doesn't. It's not flagging it up. And this is when people say to us, "Okay, we have an antivirus solution and we have updates every day." When we log on, we update it, but is it enough? For a tester, the answer is always to check it is the best approach, because if we say yes, then tomorrow might something happen. But for the time of day and stamp, we can test those solutions. And to be honest, in the past and even up today, we report stuff to vendors, to Oracle, to Microsoft, to so it's not only for your eyes, but it's also for everyone. So if we give it to you on a pen test and we submit it to the vendor, then not only you secure yourself, but also everyone around it. But EDRs and antiviruses are, EDRs is next level, of course, but antivirus solutions, I don't think it's a good approach. This is how most things get happen, actually. Yeah.
It's some kind of false feeling of security, huh?
Yeah, so they say, okay, you're up to date, and best approach is to stay up to date, and best approach is to keep users out of this user group and this user group and this user group. But yeah, it's not false, completely false. It's not for businesses, it's for home users. Let me put it this way.
Okay.
Yeah. So for businesses, you need to have
point.
For businesses, I think you have to have the solid foundation. When you buy a laptop, you have Defender, you have Office 365. But if you open a business, you need to have everything controlled by a layered approach. Okay, I have an email address. Okay, is it OneDrive? Yeah. Does it back up my Teams chat? Yes. Does it back up my received files? Yes. Does it back up my documents? Yes. Funny story. We compromised a user, and he had everything on his OneDrive. So all his Teams chats, all his documents, all his files,
everything,
all his password stored. Yeah. So how is this, protected by a business instead of a user? Microsoft and most vendors' approach to users, we are very easy to use. We are A, B, and C. Open it, you log in, you join the calls. But that's from a home network, for example. My mother-in-law uses those things, but from a business, it's like, okay, we have it, but it's free, and we don't have to use anything on top of it, because it does nearly the same thing, but in reality, it's not. And this is when the time to, you know, they let people actually make decisions to fund the best EDRs, to fund the best IDSs, the best, you know, incident response team, testers, everything manual, everything automated. Automated is key for big enterprises. But the ones that are, you know, we call it APIs, APMs, and those deserve
APMs
time.
would be
Automated
abbreviation for.
something.
Okay.
Yeah. So those are the endpoints that do require a tiny bit more attention, you know.
I mean, because we see, you know, a lot of, you know, end users and companies really relying on antivirus. Like, hey, you know, we don't need anything else because we have an antivirus license, and that's really, you know, the sense of false security.
False security, definitely, because anything that you have the antivirus installed on, for example, a Windows 10 machine on the network, and that environment is joined to Active Directory. So you have a whole breach scenario of Active Directory. That Active Directory is synced with the cloud. So you have Azure on top of it. And you have, you know, so there's a whole Active Directory is so vulnerable, in a sense, you can compromise it within 5 minutes.
25 minutes.
Within 5 minutes.
Within 5?
Within 5 minutes, yes.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Well.
If there's no signature sign-in, SMB sign-in, if there's no LDAP sign-in, it's pretty much game over, actually. If you have Kerberos authentication or delegations, it's also game over. Because on Active Directory, I'll tell you, it's not necessarily relying the network based on computers. It's also each machine that you have joined to an Active Directory can create up to 10 machines by itself. And with SMB, you know, relay attacks, anti-LM relay attacks, you can actually assign a password to it, and you can actually log into that machine that's not actually on the network, because your machine created it and you have only a limited foothold on the machine. And yeah, you can do so much more with it. And an antivirus solution is where you install it on, and this is basically what you receive as a file and where you export as a file or you download as a file if it gets catched. Yes or no? EDRs has a whole different scenario. It's a bit more protected, but when I say best practices come in place, this is where the best configuration needs to be in place. So you really need to have, like, for example, a dedicated team that specializes in those things. So you have a PAM team, you have an Active Directory team, you have a first line support team, you have, you know, access control.
Of course. Now, as you mentioned, with the cloud, Microsoft 365, you have to have a specialist who knows what he's doing, because as we've seen, and I think I read also somewhere that a majority of, you know, incidents happen because of misconfigurations within the M365.
So when they get, for example, a foothold, like I mentioned, like if they manage to get into a system with a limited shell, we call it shell, they behave as a user, so they don't execute malicious code. They just add themselves to, literally like how we got access to a database. Okay, you add yourself or you keep this account. So you prevent detections from you being detected as a compromised user, because that same user will still log in the next morning, and so on, so on, so on. You keep your initial foothold based on the scenario. And it's very tricky nowadays, because firewall rules, they have outbound firewall rules, and if it's any, it's not good, because you can, but now you can bind payloads. You can bind them to Office 365. You can bind them to OneDrive, legitimate sources.
What do you mean by binding payloads to?
So, for example, yeah, sure, of course, because if you open a file and it connects to my machine on a port, so 444, for example, but I can have my C2 command and control, for example, Cobalt Strike or any other tool. I can make it listen not on a port, but on a service, for example, as an application on Microsoft OneDrive, on Azure. And those URLs are whitelisted because it's Office 365. So you bind them. So it's not port. HTTP traffic to HTTP traffic, yeah.
Okay. Specifically in regards to Cobalt Strike. Cobalt Strike is really for a long time on the market, right? It's like well-known tool. And what I also heard, you know, recently, that a lot of companies are really not implementing policies of, you know, blocking any activities done by Cobalt Strike. You know, I mean, I think it should be some kind of common sense. Do you also see it on your side as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you know, most of the breaches, when they look back at the first entry point, is all Cobalt Strike, default Cobalt Strike. Yeah, 100%, 100%. And yeah, when I mentioned, like, for example, Defender doesn't flag it up as a high, on the alert as a high, and you get notified straight away. As a medium, they just ignores, oh, we only prioritize the highs. But the foothold does not execute any malicious code, so it's not going to be flagged as a high.
Of course,
So,
of course,
yeah.
of course. Nothing officially wrong was done in the eyes of the system. Yeah, well, this was an amazing insight. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for today. So, when it comes to, let's say, some kind of takeaways for today's session, for our IT service providers and MSPs out there, if there would be, one advice that you would give them in terms of, let's say, layered security approach or creating your baseline, what would it be?
So definitely, security foundation based on antivirus solutions, EDRs, group policy, Active Directory, accounts that are basically used for multiple use cases. So one account has access to X amount of databases, for example. Best practices when it comes to Active Directory, this is a really important one actually. Sign-in, everything has to be signed. So LDAP sign-in, SMB sign-in, so you cannot relay the whole network based on a user without authentication. MAC address approach, white filtering, and also the database and the confidential endpoints. There needs to be paid a tiny bit more attention to than the actual foundation, because you secure everything with your security layered foundation, anything from HR to marketing to IT. But there's always a few endpoints that deserve that kind of special attention when it comes to manual testing. Okay, if really someone wants to hack us or to breach us and to frame us, how is this happening? And from an endpoint perspective, those softwares don't necessarily understand or know it yet, because there is a manual approach to be done instead of a scanner level. So yeah, best practices, audits, access control, user access control, PAM solutions, like you mentioned, and a team that actually first hands up when an alert comes in place. And there's also cloud security, of course, based on access control and based on privilege access control. So those things, and the rest is, you bring in a pen tester and he will actually do his magic, or his weird voodoo, if we may call it, something that had never been seen before. And you take away the endpoint, you take away the good things about it, because you have an EDR solution. During the pen test, has the attacks been detected? If the answer is yes, that means your solution is basically working. So you need to have a eye out for those kind of alerts when that comes in place, what kind of users log in, if they are restricted based on working hours, and so on. So you have an event view if you want to go for a manual approach. But testers always come in place when vendors or clients are not afraid, but they feel like something can be done besides their solution that they have in place. And a good amount of the time it is, okay, we found this because this is a place and this is a place and this is how we got in. And those settings most likely have been in place for the past X amount of years, and it's not being detected. But then you see the value of a penetration test that come in place, and how those things are executed based on a methodology that real APTs are using, real hackers are using. We keep up to date with the latest tools. We have our own tools, because we see an endpoint that reacts in a certain way on an application. We see a network that basically either don't have SMB sign-in required, that you can relay the whole network on. You can have access to it. So I would say those things. So best practices, definitely antivirus solutions, virus, and also from the outside in. So VPN, firewall rules, if any is allowed, for example. Who are your vendors? How do you identify them? And how do you spot a suspicious email, for example? Because for me, it's going to be very strange if I receive that, I don't know, the next morning from a client of mine to open something, from my approach, to be honest, I don't call it paranoia, but I really call them. Is this really you? Is everything okay? do we know about something? Because if you have everything in place and your client, if your partners are compromised based on one email address, you have access to a mailbox, and you can see where your conversations come from. And from an attacker point of view, they always reply to the latest email that they have communicated out to the whitelisted vendor, and they are spreading their payloads or whatever that actually redirects it to that. So it's not a direct payload, but it's something that's whitelisted on a firewall rule based approach or a email based rule. So it's not directly executable and you have access. So it's basically a dropper. So you have access to a page, it downloads the PDF, you enable, for example, macros, it drops it to your a system where it reboots the persistence folder, the startup folders. Every time that you restart your computer, it actually executes that kind of payload,
So basically, yeah. So basically, your suggestion would be, instead of just taking, layers of, security randomly, it's better, to hire a pen tester, to assess the environment and system and tell you specifically, okay, these are, the solutions, the technologies that would help you protect your system at this point.
At this point, okay. Solutions and configurations and the recommendations, and and of course a pen test report will also have the clear overview with screenshots and how to reproduce what kind of endpoints it has, what kind of ports it has open, what can you do with those ports. And yeah, you have basically a full methodology and a scenario, what you have open and what you can do with it. Yeah. So yeah, it's good to have both. But the way that I see it, the pen test is always something that you feel like it deserves a tiny bit more attention based on an asset. So is this asset holding confidential data? Then yeah, okay, we need to look at solutions, we need to look at pen testing, we need to look at compliance. So all three come in place. But when it comes to a machine that has no confidential data, that is segmented from the network, that has nothing to do with the company, but they're connected to a guest Wi-Fi, does it require a penetration test? I don't think so. So yeah, where's your focus and what you want to achieve? So you have the confident. You're confident to say, okay, my solutions work because it detects your pen test or the malicious attacks and the usual payloads and everything in between. We also have a timeline that we keep, like what we done, throughout the scenarios. But yeah, I think it will be great for both, of course. So all compliance, best practices, and solutions. Yes.
Understood. So for everybody, listening and watching this podcast, if you want to reach out to Abbas, get more information, or see if there's a chance of hiring um, for their services, we will leave the link and the description in the description of the podcast itself. Abbas, thank you very much, for joining us today. Thank you for, sharing your valuable insights with us. Hopefully we'll have another opportunity to chat on this topic. For everybody else, I would thank you for listening to us. If you liked the session, please hit the like and subscribe button for more. You can always reach out to us via our website, email, telephone, in case you want to know more about layered security or services that either we or Paradox InfoSec cybersecurity is providing. We will be happy to share with you. If you want to have more content from us, check out the blog and subscribe to our newsletter. And yeah, Abbas, I want to thank you once again for today.
Thank you.
And I'll see you and all our viewers next time on the next session.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure.
Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.